right into this.
Is this good?
Yeah.
Okay. Cinemajaw is sponsored by Overcast, an independent podcast app that embraces the open world of podcasting instead of locking it down. No exclusives, no premium content, no paywalls. Just a great podcast app for everyone. Get it for free in the App Store.
Cinemajaw is also brought to you by Jiffy On Demand. Broken things can still pop up around the house. Toilets and sinks can get backed up. Washing machines break. If you need help, Jiffy is still available. Their pros have been advised to practice safe protocols like washing hands before and after jobs, sanitizing equipment before and after, reassigning jobs if they are at heightened risk, communicating only over the app as opposed to in person as much as possible. And guys, outdoor jobs can still be done without any interaction with another person. Jiffy prides itself on being paperless, so if you want your lawn done, your roof fixed, your exterior windows washed, or your walkway power washed, all you need to do is put it in the app and communicate with your pro. Oh, and get this, Jiffy knows they're not going to save the world, but if they can make it so jawheads have an extra $50 in their pocket during this time, then that's what they're going to do. The offer code Cinemajaw is now worth $50 off your Jiffy job. So check them out, Jiffy On Demand, and we thank them for their support. You're listening to Cinemajaw, the greatest movies podcast ever, recorded on location from our respective homes in Chicago. My name is Matt Kay, and with me is...
Rye, the movie guy. And this week on Cinemajaw, Matt, we get greedy. Very, very greedy with our top 5 lists as we cover our top 5 movies about greed.
Well, I wanted to do even more than 5, Ryan. I wanted 10.
I wanted 15.
20.
There's no stop.
That's right.
Nothing stops our greed list. But we are doing our top 5 movies about greed because it ties into a movie we are reviewing this week, right, Matt?
That's right. We are covering Netflix's The Platform this week, Ryan.
It's exciting. Also, as you mentioned, and as you have been mentioning the last couple of weeks, we are recording these podcasts remote. We are in our houses, but this week we're trying something different. We actually have a guest who's going to be joining us.
Yeah, I'm excited. Troy Walsh is going to be joining us. He's known throughout Chicago as a guy who operates drones, does a lot of filmmaking with aerial shots, and he just had this movie a short film called Silent City, which is making the rounds on the internets, Ryan, and I'm excited to talk to him. Very timely guest.
Exactly. Plus, we will play another bout of Stump the Kabinski. 3 questions that Matt Kay has to try to answer. If he gets one of those right, we will switch it, and you can try to stump rather.
But since you're writing the questions, it's never going to happen. But okay,
we'll see.
Okay, all right.
Also, some Hollywood headlines that we will discuss. And believe it or not, Matt, we are in April. I saw a very funny tweet since we're all inside these days, and the tweet said, "Boy, that was a really long year of March."
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I totally agree. But we normally on the podcast talk about how fast the months go when we're, normal activity and trying to squeeze in the podcast. But March did feel long, but we're in April now.
Things are moving. And continuing to do the podcast, at least for me, has kept the time moving a little bit more satisfactorily when it has seemed very slow lately.
I agree. With April comes a new theme. Obviously, March, we just got done celebrating Pixar month. We looked. Obviously, there's no new movies opening up in movie theaters, but there is a big movie called The Quarry coming out on video on demand, and it stars one Michael Shannon.
Chicago's
so, ladies
own.
and gentlemen, it is time we celebrate Michael Shannon on Cinemajaw. So April will be known as Michael Shannon month here on this podcast. I start off with this fact, Matt. His first screen credit, as far as film, goes back to when he was only 18 years old in 1993's Groundhog Day.
Whoa.
He plays the small role of Fred, who is given WrestleMania tickets from Bill Murray's character.
I did not know that. Holy crap, I got to rewatch Groundhog's Day.
Michael Shannon is in Groundhog's Day. And I saw it. One of the last times I actually sat down and watched Groundhog Day, I saw him. And it was one of those where you laugh. You're just stunned. Like, oh, my goodness, that's Michael Shannon. I didn't know he was in this,
That's
but
nuts.
it's just a bit part, a cameo type of role. Well, not a cameo at that point, an extra kind of role. He just has a small bit.
Bonus fact quickly. Michael Shannon actually worked at one of the bars that I used to manage and do the marketing for. He worked at the Hang Up, Ryan. There's even a video online of him talking about how at the end of the night they would take all the juice from the bar mats and pour it into a shot glass and give it to the new guy to drink. It's called the penalty shot. And he got one of those and drank it. So
that's awesome.
He recounted that story.
Nice.
I'll have to find the clip.
I love it. So all month long, we will be celebrating Michael Shannon with poll questions, clips, and trivia, just like you got there.
Perfect.
Fun, hey?
Hey, I'm a big fan. That's a good one.
So we're bringing on a guest here for the first time doing this remote. And as Matt mentioned, Troy Walsh, he is the founder of Drone Media Chicago, and he has a film out called Silent City. Troy, welcome to Cinemajaw.
Thanks for having me.
And this is your first ever podcast, is that right?
It is. Maybe my second or third time on Zoom as well. So, yeah.
Well, it seems like we're all doing a lot of Zoom. Yeah. It's an honor.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Troy, before we get to Silent City, let's start with Drone Media Chicago and how that started and what it's all about.
Drone Media Chicago, as kind of the name implies, a Chicago-based aerial production company specializing in aerial video and photography, and also traditional ground video and photography as well. But definitely lead with the aerial video and photography.
Do a lot of smaller productions that are filming in Chicago come to you and look for like specifically drone shots?
Yeah, depending on kind of who the client is or what type of, job it is. Some production companies will do the in-house aerial work themselves. Others will, contract out to a company like ours to help in their aerial needs.
So how did you come to have this skill set? Like, how did you come to drones, and at what point did you decide this is going to be my vocation? Like, was it a hobby first and you just loved it so much you wanted to build a company around it?
It's kind of exactly how it happened. A lot of people typically assume that, either I had a film or a background in production, but it was kind of the other way around, where I had experience in kind of building and flying remote control airplanes and helicopters since I was a kid. It was really just a hobby when the drones kind of hit the market. At first, it was a lot of do-it-yourself kind of community, probably back in like 2014, 2013, kind of like buy all off-the-shelf kind of stuff and solder it together and program it together and hope that it flew and strap a GoPro on there and press record, and that's kind of how it started. Times have definitely changed though.
Now, I have had the pleasure of actually witnessing Troy pilot some of these drones, and even in indoor spaces, it's pretty impressive, man. Like, how many hours would you say you've put into just piloting?
Hours? A lot. Like I said, I've been flying remote control airplanes and helicopters probably since I was 12. So the piloting skill set I've kind of always had, that was easy to translate over to flying drones. It was the film, the cinematography, the photography end is what I really had to learn to kind of be where I'm at today.
So when you're moving the drone around, you also have controls to move the camera around as well on the drone, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Almost like four joysticks then, right?
Yeah, depending how you think of it. So there's either there's either what we refer to as a one or two man operation. So one man operation, just as it implies, you're operating the drone and you're also controlling the camera movement. Two man operation, as again, you'd probably guess, you have one person operating the drone and the other person operating the gimbal or the movement of the camera. So I guess a good way to think of it is if you were in a helicopter, one person's flying the helicopter, and then you have a camera operator out the side filming. Two different techniques
I noticed a lot of smaller films as far as budget go that we've watched here on Cinemajaw recently having, incorporated drone shots, and it just adds to the production value because all of a sudden you get this aerial shot and it just gives you the scope that there's more budget than there is to the production. That's what the aerial shot can do for these smaller films.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely more accessible to, to smaller productions or indie style films. Once what was only achieved by hiring full-scale helicopter and camera team for a day for 15 to 20 grand, you can now achieve very similar shots with something that'll almost fit in your pocket and produce pretty impressive.
So that brings us to
results.
Silent City, which is a short video that you made. Obviously, we're in times where cities are basically have been abandoned into some regard. There's very few people out on the street. We're all indoors. And it gives a time to take out these drones and shoot some video that you would never get any other time. Because even at 2:00 in the morning in Chicago, there's people out and walking around.
Many.
But Silent City inside this film has these sort of eerie images, and it's in black and white. It's set to wonderful music that I got to ask you about. And it's just showing the city completely empty. And we're talking about major tourist attractions with not a soul around. It's eerie and in a way beautiful.
First of all, I doubt I was the first person to think of going out and shooting the city when, it was, really desolate. But I'd seen some pictures. This was probably the Monday before it was announced that we had the shelter in place. And I just saw a picture on Wacker Drive. People were still going to work, but restaurants had just announced, that they were going to be closing like the next day or two. And it was just really weird. I saw a picture just on Wacker Drive when there's usually, a bunch of people out, and there wasn't anybody. So I thought to myself, well, I'm really not doing anything the next week because everything that I had in the pipeline, the previous week, everybody was pulling out. So, I mean, the writing was on the wall in a sense where this is going to go a very different direction than I think everybody anticipated. So I thought, I'm a photographer. I enjoy going and shooting around for fun as a hobby. Thought, if Wacker Drive right now is almost empty, I'm like, I bet a lot of the popular spots are the same places that I really enjoy going and shooting. I wonder what that's going to be like. And I thought, why not shoot some video while I'm at it? So kind of how it started.
Yeah, and just to sort of, we'll include a link to the video because it's very short, but just to sort of give some idea for the audio listeners that these are shots of famous Chicago landmarks like the Bean, like the face fountains in Millennium Park, the Art Museum, the
Art Institute.
Yeah, the Art Institute, the subway in particular. There's this shot in the film of just doors opening and closing on the CTA, and there's nobody on the trains. And it's such an eerie feeling to watch this. It's almost, I hesitate to say apocalyptic, but that's what it is when you're so used to seeing these places very, very populated, and to see them empty in the middle of the day is breathtaking.
Yeah. I think when I had thought about shooting it as a video, I was thinking to myself, how do I tell kind of this story, or how do I let the audience have a visual that there's nothing here yet? This is film, this is video, this is live. So when I was filming it, I was looking for things that would kind of give context to that this is actually video and not just a still image. So like you said, the opening and shutting of the CTA, or, just the birds landing and, nothing around them, or the wind picking up and blowing paper by. Those were, to me, very powerful because there was nothing there, but the rest of kind of the environment around was giving context that this is real. This is not just a photo.
Yeah. Or a play, or, a fictional movie, because like obviously we've all seen sets where they close down streets, even on like in New York City, but this was real life, which comes through in the film.
I haven't seen a piece of paper move across the screen and be so powerful since American Beauty.
Yeah.
But about the music in the film, how did you set it to music? Because I think it coincides perfectly with the images.
I knew it wasn't going to be a happy. Well, it's not. And it wasn't a happy time, and it wasn't supposed to be. I mean, it was. The music was supposed to kind of evoke kind of how I felt when I was putting it together, when I was kind of piecing the video together, and it was very important for me to find an arrangement or a song that carried kind of the visuals, and I stumbled across that and had enough depth to it, kind of a somber feel, yet very eerie kind of noise mixed in with it, kind of unsettling, but also kind of pretty, like a very beautiful song. So it had a lot of dynamics and elements to it that just kind of paired well with the visuals that I was arranging.
It's an awesome video.
It is an awesome video. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, we were talking a little bit before we hit record that the film got picked up here in Chicago by all of our local news sources, WGN and a few others that people are probably familiar with from elsewhere. But when it really hit home for me that your film had kind of, I don't want to use the word viral, but that's the term, right? It had gone viral, was when we have some fans out in New Zealand and they sent me the link, and I was like, wow, this film has gone across around the globe, literally. And it had become, for a moment, kind of a symbol of all these shutdowns that were happening. So I just wanted to ask you, like, what that experience was like, seeing this kind of take off. And then what has it been like since?
When I finished it, when I thought myself, I'm happy where this is. I was really happy with it. I'd shot it over the course of 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, pretty much edited it within, I went to post for like 1 day. And then like by Friday, I was pretty happy with it. Yeah. I was like, I'll share this on my Facebook. And I thought some people would react to it, would respond and kind of have the same feeling that I had, was just kind of like, wow, this is real.
Yeah.
And then, I think within like a day, it had been shared a bunch of times. Then I think I woke up the next day and it had like 20,000 views or something. And then within like a week, it had a lot of shares and a lot of views.
Is this the first video that you made that has gone sort of in this direction, like had a trajectory like this?
Yeah. In terms of the amount of times it's been shared and watched and people reach out to me, and, definitely. Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously the subject matter is somber, but I'm glad that it's getting you attention, because I think it's a wonderful piece of filmmaking, man. And I think it also communicated something very important out to all the corners of the earth, and you should be proud of it.
Well, thank you. Like I think we were saying earlier, I wish it was something a little more uplifting.
Right. Sure.
But it's the reality of where we're at, and it's still hard for me to believe that this has all happened within such a short period of time, and how really we've all got kind of turned on our heads by this whole thing.
One question I did want to ask you about film in general, because you're sort of an aerial guy. Do you have a particular shot that is like a favorite of yours when it comes to aerial, be it drone or old school movie magic? Do you have one that sticks out?
Shawshank Redemption opening.
I'm trying to remember.
Where they go over the jail, right?
It's a one-take aerial shot that lasts for about, 45 seconds, and it's awesome.
Do you happen to know if that was a traditional like helicopter or if that was a drone? Because Shawshank was in the 90s, right?
It was a helicopter. It was it's like a one-take shot. That's the opening, and it's like, I want to say a minute long. It's just a really long, kind of really neat, low aerial shot leading up to the prison.
It's one of my favorite.
I recall it to some degrees, yeah. Like that one. I was doing a little research when we had you on, and I noticed there's a great drone shot in Skyfall. It's a motorcycle race in the James Bond movie where they used a drone watching him drive the motorcycle over the rooftops. Really well done.
I got one too. Although it's a bit of a cheat. I was doing the research as well. At the end of Birdman, when Michael Keaton flies through the city. I don't want to spoil the ending for people who may not have seen Birdman, but it's a bit of a cheat, I say, because it was actually achieved with a crane that they raised above the streets of New York City. While it's not a true aerial shot in the sense it was from a flying machine, it gives you the sense of flight very, very well. And of course, that movie is all ostensibly one take, even though I think they had some digital cuts in there. It's just brilliant camera work. It was a great shot.
I love a good aerial shot. There's no doubt. Troy, before we let you go, you probably heard we're celebrating Michael Shannon month here on Cinemajaw. So I did want to ask you, do you have a favorite Michael Shannon performance or film?
I liked Iceman a lot, where he played Richard Kolklinski, the
hitman.
He was pretty much a hitman for the mafia. I think he's a great actor. I mean, I loved him in The Shape of Water as well. I think what I really liked about him in the Iceman is prior to seeing the movie, I had actually watched maybe a Dateline or 2020 where they actually interviewed him, and just remember observing like his character, how he was as a person, the actual serial killer on 2020 or whatever it was.
Oh, wow.
And then I saw the movie where he was played by Michael Shannon, just how well he portrayed that character. It was really good.
He's a great actor, that's for sure.
He's a gem of Chicago, no doubt about it.
As Matt mentioned, we will put a link to the video in the show notes. And Troy, thanks for coming on Cinemajaws. It's been a blast, and congratulations on the video. Can't wait to see more work from you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, guys, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah, and next time we'll be in our studio when we can have you on a full episode and give you the royal treatment, man.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Stay safe and healthy, man.
All right, you guys do the same.
Thanks, Troy.
All right, see ya.
Trapped inside? Worried about food supply? No, I'm not talking about home confinement from the coronavirus. I'm describing the new Netflix sci-fi film, The Platform. It premiered as part of Midnight Madness at last year's Toronto International Film Festival, where it won the audience award of said event. It also secured a deal with Netflix at that time. Matt and I, not feeling enclosed enough these days, decided to give this strange concept film a stream.
There are three kinds of people: the ones above, the ones below, and the ones who fall.
So this is,
The pit. Bingo.
Mr. Trimagasi, do you know how this all works?
It's obvious. We must eat
What will it be?
whatever the ones above don't want.
Our main character wakes up on the 48th floor. There is one other person in his cell, or I should say, on his floor. In a rushed explanation from this older man, we find out that a platform is coming down the center of the room filled with food. The catch is, the first 47 floors already had their pick of things. By the time it hits the 48th floor, we have half-eaten meals and leftover scraps. The older inmate, who has been there for some time, helps himself to a meal, while our new inmate skips. The mystery is set. What is this place? Why are they there? And what is up with the platform of food? As questions are answered, the theme of the film, that of which is an attack and/or an examination of capitalism and greed, becomes very apparent. In fact, it's quite blunt. Matt, you were a fan of the film The Cube. You like high-concept sci-fi films. Did you like what The Platform had on its menu after the concept was revealed?
More or less, yes. But like the movie, the mental snacks are better at the higher levels and break down somewhat the deeper one gets. You mentioned The Cube, which is a hidden gem that everyone should see. and an obvious influence on this film. Very obvious. However, as you also mentioned, the theme is shuffled into a vertical allegory for class structure. While this is very on the nose, I thought that it was acted and written well enough to work quite well. However, unlike The Cube, this movie didn't leave me thinking despite its rather murky ending, Ryan. As the film unfolds, more and more about the scope and rules of this pit are revealed, and with each revelation, a little of the effectiveness is stripped away like flesh from the bone. Put another way, the movie cannibalizes its own message for the sake of moving the story forward. So by the end, it's a terribly injured message that barely survives, literally and figuratively, Ryan. Please excuse the upcoming mispronunciations. I mentioned the acting. Ivan Masag as main character Goring is great, but his first cellmate, Trimagasi, played by Zorian Eligur, takes the cake. His calm acceptance and matter-of-fact delivery in the face of hellish conceit gives him all the trappings of a Hannibal Lecter and perhaps the appetites to boot. This may not be the allegorical, accidentally timely masterpiece that it's trumped up to be, but it was a fun ride nevertheless, and it does at least prime the pump for a discussion of the ills of capitalism. So kudos for that, but I still prefer The Cube, Rye. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think? Was the film successful in its message, or was the panna cotta eaten before the platform reached the bottom of the pit?
It was eaten before it got to the bottom of the pit, right? It had to be.
I think so.
Yes, it is very on the nose, as I had mentioned. It's blunt. It does going to get the conversation going, and I guess that's where we'll start, is the theme / message of the film, that of which is capitalism and why everybody at the top takes so much when they don't need that much. And as the platform goes down, if everybody would just take what they had, there'd be plenty of enough food for everybody, is the thought. But I get it. I just don't like the bluntness of it.
It's really on the nose, man.
It really is. So for me, I was like, well, okay, I get it.
It's not that clever.
Right. But now you got to give me something more as the movie progresses. Right. Give me another twist. Give me another theme. And I think they were going for that theme of, and I don't want to go spoilers here, but of what they were trying to, bring back up to the top floor was supposed to be representing a message here. But to me, it wasn't enough for the bluntness of the theme. Yeah.
No, I agree. You're right. Because first of all, there's a whole bunch of little nitpicky things that I find, like there's this one platform of food, and as it gets lower and further along in the story and we find out exactly how big this place is, they say there's enough food on that platform, but when you think about how many people are really there, no, there's not.
I agree that the scale of the platform then is wrong if that's what they were actually going for. I agree with you.
Right. So even if all the people just took a tiny bit of food, it still wouldn't have fed everybody. But that's a nitpicky thing. So I'll allow that suspension of disbelief or whatever. But you're right. There's just nothing else to sort of get into. They touch on a few other themes. One that I don't think is a spoiler is cannibalism, right? Because this is a movie about hunger also. And some of the people on the lower levels are forced to resort to cannibalism. But I found that, here's a nitpicky little thing. It's 30 days. It's 30 days. Like, true, your next 30 days, you might be in an even lower level because that's one of the rules. You don't know where you're going to be next month. But wouldn't you at least try on your first month in a bad level to not eat your roommate?
Agree. 100%.
And yeah, it's just, there was too many of those little nitpicky things for me.
I have another nitpick before you go further, because
okay, go.
I had this down actually as, dare I say, a nitpick. And that is the fact that when the platform's coming down, they would each get on one side of the platform like it's a dining room table, especially the first scene where the rules are sort of explained to us. You constantly see that older inmate kneel down, he puts the pillow, and he gets on this one side. That is not how you would actually go about eating a platform of food. You would probably stand and look around to see what's there. You wouldn't just grab what's in front of you he's literally grabbing just what's in front of him when he's got a whole platform of there might have been an apple, not even had a bite out of it in the middle of the table, but he's not even looking at it.
Well, there was, right? In that very first scene, the main character, Goring, finds an apple, the exact thing you just mentioned, unbitten. Yeah, I agree. Although Trimagasi is probably the best part of the movie, who sticks around throughout the entire movie, partially when he's in reality and partially when let's just say he's not quite exactly there physically. And I thought, give me more of him. He was the best part of the whole movie. I don't know if you had this problem, but when I first fired it up on Netflix, it was the English dub and the English subtitles, which didn't sync up. And I had to decide which one I was going to turn off. I didn't like the subtitles. I preferred the dub, and I went with the English dub. What did you do?
Well, what's funny, I'm glad that you brought this up, is mine just started playing with the dubbed version. It didn't even give me an option for me.
Same.
Yeah, but I didn't know subtitles either. So I actually forgot that this was,
a foreign film?
Just for a second. I hit play, it starts, everybody starts talking. I'm talking maybe 2 minutes into it. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this is dubbed, isn't it? And then I thought, just leave it. And I left the dubbing. I thought the dubbing was okay, but usually I never do that.
I agree with you. The dubbing was fantastic to the point where you just don't even notice the difference. You don't see that lip sync problem you get from like an old kung fu movie. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
None of that. It was perfect. I went with the English dub. The English subtitles I found to be lacking. That's just a little tip for the jawheads. If you watch this, I would say go ahead and watch the English dub. It was very well done.
So I thought overall the film sort of peaked a little too early, because you do have this sort of high concept idea of this platform, this jail. It's explained that they can come in with one item, but I don't know how far that even went. Did that go anywhere for you?
No, and yeah.
Would they really allow somebody to bring a knife into it?
There's knives. They say some people bring bats and crossbows and guns. Like, if I had a gun, I would just roll down the thing and shoot everybody, Right. Although I guess you would run out of ammunition sooner or later.
Very strange. And the vagueness of why some people were going in, some were going to study. Our main character was trying to get a diploma. I didn't understand. I don't know if that was fully explained, or I sort of missed why some of those people were coming in, because later we're met with another character, a female character that is sharing the floor with our main guy. And she's there for another reason. She somewhat explains it, but I don't think it was explained enough for me anyways.
I agree. There's a lot of potential here, but in the end, I think Cube did it better. The Cube, different story. It doesn't get into the Messiah sort of thing that this movie gets into toward the end. But The Cube, I think, is a better examination of human behavior.
And I hated this lady that I just spoke of. She was the one that kept saying, I fixed you a plate with enough food. Just take that and fix a plate for the next person down.
Yeah, gentlemen.
Talk about on the nose and just too much. That was ridiculous.
It was. Like, what? Who cares? I mean, this isn't the world that they're in, right? This is just a prison that they're in. So I get it that she's trying to fix the prison, but was it a social experiment? Maybe, but we don't really find out. And I found that a little unsatisfying. They could have at least hinted at some answers, and they just don't. Maybe it's just an allegory, and that's fine. And it was clever enough, even though it's derivative. It was okay. I liked it, but I don't find it brilliant.
I'm with you. And the other part that I didn't like was there was no explanation of the people actually making the food at the top. There's these fantastical shots of them actually preparing the dinner, and that they care so much about making these plates of food and the presentation of the food on the platform. Why? Who are these people? I need those answers.
Well, yeah, I guess that was part of the sick joke. Like, it's sort of a Marie Antoinette type syndrome situation where they're like, let them eat cake. So you have these highly trained chefs up at the top who have this like rigorous quality control, and they're making dishes like panna cotta and escargot and like really highfalutin dishes that are literally descending into a pit where most people are just grabbing them with their hands and shoving them in their face. So the people below them, so they can gorge themselves, and the people below them have, table scraps. It's gross. And I think that was a missed opportunity. they could have gotten into that a bit more. And I'm not asking for like clear answers and explanations. I like room for interpretation, but this was just too murky.
You got a movie poster quote for me?
I do. Panna cotta, escargot, cannibalism, and class structure.
I went with, "We'll leave you starving and looking up, obviously."
Very good. Very good. I like that a lot.
The key word, obviously.
Yes, yes. I'm giving this one 2.5 Jaws, and that might be generous, but I do think it was a fun, high concept sci-fi movie. I don't think it's this brilliant, timely deconstruction of capitalism that we were all looking to see right now, but I liked it well enough.
We're agreeing way too much recently. I don't know if it's because we're separated. We're not in the same studio, but I am also going 2.5 Jaws for the platform. I recommend checking it out. You agree there, right? I mean, if
Yes.
you're at home, we're confined, and you need something new to watch, this is interesting enough to definitely recommend. And it's weird enough to recommend. So
Right.
check it out. 2.5 Jaws I'm recommending, but it's nothing like, wow, unbelievable, great.
No, and one thing I will say to the Jawheads, because I was a little trepidatious, because right now I'm just not in the mood for like really disturbing movies. I've been leaving those off my queue at the moment, but this is not really disturbing. I mean, obviously it's kind of a hellish prisonscape, but it leans more into the sci-fi and the characters, and it doesn't get seriously disturbing. I mean, there's some gore, there's some cannibalism we mentioned, but I don't think this is one that's going to like leave you unsettled after you watch it.
Well said. There is greed in this film, obviously. As
Yes.
people on the top floors are greedy, take way too much food. Me and Matt went back and forth on a top 5 list this week, and we landed on greed. That is our top 5 this week. It'd be too easy if one of us picked Wallstreet. Right away,
I agree.
Jawheads, everybody is saying Wallstreet. We know Wallstreet. So we said this is going to be sort of an honorary top 5 list in honor, right, of Wallstreet. So let's hear from Gordon Gekko.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed in all of its forms. Greed for life, for money, for love, knowledge, has marked the upward surge of mankind, and greed, you mark my words, will not only save Teldar paper, but that other malfunctioning corporation called the USA. Thank you very much.
Greed is good, Matt. You heard it there. Greed is good.
Well, for lack of a better term, Rye.
You're getting us started this week. Mr.
All right.
Greedy, what do you got at 5?
All right. At number 5, here's the thing. You're going to be mad at me because I talk about this movie probably too much. And I think I've put it on like 3 lists recently. But damn it if it's not a really versatile film. And greed is central to its plot. And it is John Carpenter's They Live.
Oh, my God.
I'll explain exactly why this movie is about greed. There are about 3 characters that Nada, who's played by Roddy Piper, meets throughout the movie. When he meets when he's in this shanty town, because he's a drifter, he's homeless. He's going from construction site to get work. And he meets a fellow bum who's sort of just like one of the talkers of this little shanty town. And it gets bulldozed, and we don't know what happens to him. Later in the movie, we see that he has sold out the human race to these aliens, and now he's rich and he's got a nice watch and he's been taken care of, right? There's that one. There's also a character who is his love interest who, and listen, guys, spoiler alert, but this movie's like from the late 80s, early 90s, so They Live is plenty old enough. His love interest who, again, we think that she's on our side, and then she turns out to be a sellout to these aliens, and he goes into banks and financial institutions. We see money, and instead of saying, "In God we trust," when you put on the special glasses, he can see that it says, "This is your God." The movie is all about capitalism and greed and how we are just sheep consumers that sleep while they live, you know? That's kind of what it's about. It is. That's my number 5, Ryan. What do you got?
My number 5 is a film that came out in 2016. It stars Michael Keaton. as Ray Kroc. It is the founder. And
Nice.
It is the story of Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's. A lot of people probably know the story that Ray Kroc met the McDonald's brothers who were making these delicious hamburgers at a fast pace and decided to franchise their idea.
Right. And hence McDonald's is born.
But he ends up more or less taking over the entire thing. And the two brothers, the McDonald's brothers, end up more or less getting bought out. And their paycheck at the time was $2.7 million, which I know sounds like a ton of money.
Especially back then.
Right. But when the greed comes in, when they were willing to sign it over to Ray Kroc, the McDonald's brothers, the two brothers that were making these delicious burgers, said $2.7 million, and we want 1% of the royalties every year. And he agreed to that originally, but then when the contract came in, he left the 1% royalty out on purpose. And there's something weird about greed that way. When you think about how rich all three of these guys could have been, even if he gave them the 1%, really, what does it matter? That 1% to Ray Kroc, would have it made that big of a difference in his life? No. But would have it made a huge difference in the McDonald's brothers' life? Yes. To the sum, roughly, the film calculates about $100 million a year the McDonald's brothers would have got from that 1%, and that was left off the contract by Ray Kroc. And it just is that odd idea, like, why not give them a little something for coming up with the concept of making these burgers the same exact way, very fast, so on and so forth, you know?
Well, I got two quick comments for you, Ryan. First of all, I would give you the 1% of Cinemajaw when we franchise this out across the globe. You can have the 1%. I'm saying it now on the podcast. It's been publicly noted.
All these percentages, we sound like a Bernie Sanders podcast.
Yeah, right. And the second comment, Joanne Kroc, I believe that's her name, his wife, did bequeath the entire or most of his fortune to public radio. If you ever listen to NPR and you hear this is made possible by listeners and the Kroc Foundation, blah, 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 that's the Kroc they're talking about. So every time you listen to Wait, Don't Tell Me, you can thank McDonald's for that. At least a little good came out of it.
My number 5, the founder. What do you got it for?
At number 4, I have a documentary. This one came out right after the big 2008 housing crash, and it is called The Queen of Versailles. And it's not necessarily about greed. I think it's about the ignorance of one's position, one's station, because at the end of the movie, it's mostly about the wife of this incredibly rich timeshare mogul. And they are in the midst of building the largest home in America. And the documentary was originally about the building of this house. But during production, the 2008 housing crisis happened, and he starts to lose his shirt. And they go from being super, super rich to just very rich, which, first world problem, I guess. But to them, like, they have to fly commercial suddenly, and all these luxuries that they're very used to, like having a staff to clean and cook and everything like that, are gone. And she has to go from being sort of I hesitate to say trophy wife, but perhaps a trophy wife, to actually being a real mom, cooking, making lunches for her kids, doing things she's not used to. We see the effect of greed, but it's more about the humanity and how some people, because she is a likable character at the end of the film, but her ignorance is very startling at the same time.
Can't recommend this one enough. I know it's come up a couple of times on Cinemajaw, and yes, great recommendation is The Queen of Versailles.
It's a good one for sure.
I like it a lot. My number 4 film is a movie we reviewed here on Cinemajaw, Netflix movie, believe it or not, 2019. It stars Ben Affleck and Oscar Isaac in Triple Frontier.
Wow, you're going with this one, huh? I didn't like this movie that much.
But when you're talking about greed, right? You have former special force guys go down to South America. They're going to do a heist job. It's going to be like a robbery of a drug lord down there, and they're going to keep all the profits because, they've had a whole career of trying to do good, and they haven't gotten rightfully paid for it. So they decide to finally keep the money for themselves. And their greed bites them in the ass numerous times. For starters, if you'll remember, they go into this house and they find out that the walls are basically all lined with money.
Right.
And
the house is the safe.
Yeah, right. And they can't stop taking the money. And at one point, I remember watching the movie just thinking, just leave. You have more money than you possibly need, but they can't stop taking the money. And of course, that leads into a shootout at the property. They eventually get to the airport, and all this money now is too heavy for the helicopter that they had planned to take out of South America. And it's so heavy that they can't get over this huge mountain because the payload's too heavy.
And they crash, literally the payload. Crash. Yeah.
And then it comes up again because they have all this money and these townspeople that they have to come across, these villagers. It's one step after another step after another step of greed getting in the way of what could have been a successful mission, make some money, get out of there, and it kills them.
It does. I think that there were some major flaws in this movie. Ben Affleck, not the least of which.
I'm not saying this is an absolutely perfect movie, but on a movie for greed, I went Triple Frontier.
Okay. I'll give it to you. All right. Back to me at number 3, Ryan. Speaking of the 2008 financial crisis, the housing crisis, I don't think another film quite explained this as well as The Big Short. What The Big Short successfully did, which a recent film from last year, The Laundromat, tried to do and failed miserably, was take a very complicated concept like the reason, the subprime mortgage lending and all the ins and outs of exactly what happened to make the bottom fall out in 2008 and boil them down to simple to understand concepts and languages. There's a couple of moments where they kind of take it a little too far, like, to explain this, here's Margot Robbie in a bathtub. I get that was done for comedic effect, and don't get me wrong, Margot Robbie in a bathtub is A-okay in my book, but maybe they took it a little too far there. I don't know. That's up to the viewer. But I think the rest of the movie is just brilliantly written, wonderfully acted. It's a great turn from Steve Carell, who plays a bit of a nerdy heel almost, but he seems to be the only guy who's on the button. It's really, when you talk about the financial movies, it's one of the best ones. And it is about greed because it sort of illustrates how these guys knew that the product that they were selling was rotten and that sooner or later the bottom would fall out, but they kept doing it anyway.
This is true. And I agree with you that it is well told in the sense of explaining the situation, as complicated as it was, and still making it entertaining. Good pick at number 3. My number 3 goes back to 1998. You ever hear of Sam Raimi?
Who?
But when you think Sam Raimi, you don't think he's making a movie about greed necessarily, but he sure did. Starred Bill Paxton, Billy Bob Thornton, Bridget Fonda. The movie is called A Simple Plan.
See, I came across this a lot in the research, and I've never seen it. So sell me on it, Rye.
All right. So I wrote this down in my journal. I have a page in my journal of need to rewatch, and I wrote this one down because I forgot how much I really cherish this film. And it is completely the story of greed and what it does to 3 men who in the beginning go out and find a downed helicopter in the woods while they're hunting. And in that helicopter, the pilot is found dead. Inside there is also $4 million in cash. And they decide to keep it. And Hank, who is played by Bill Paxton, is sort of the smartest guy. He's like the guy that went to college. He convinces them to say, hey, I'm going to keep the $4 million in my house. His brother is played by Billy Bob Thornton, sort of a slower, gentleman, oddball. Don't know what's going to happen with him. But eventually, everything becomes convoluted because Bridget Fonda, who plays Bill Paxton's wife, convinces him that if there isn't some money left on the helicopter, people are going to think, everybody stole something from there. And hey, return some of the money. And while they're doing that, a farmer comes out and everybody starts to get that paranoid feeling that everybody knows about the money. And that leads to worse things. All of a sudden they have to murder somebody because they think he knows, even though really he didn't know anything. Then that leads to the three men who know about having the money. One of them wants their cut early. He can't get it early. They're afraid he's going to spend it. All of that stuff that goes with it just keeps getting darker, darker, and darker, and twists take place. It's a tense movie. It's a thriller, and it is the absolute example of greed at its worst. A simple plan.
Nice. Like I said, I saw this one all over the research. I've never seen it, but that cast is phenomenal, and you sold me, dude. I'm going to have to check this one out. Maybe I'll actually put this at the top of my queue. I'm in the mood for a film like that.
It's a great one.
All right. That swings it back to me. And at number 2, I have a movie that is another documentary. This one is from Kartemquin Films. We actually had the honor of having the director on Cinemajaw, Kelly Richmond Pope, who is, I think like her, if memory serves, is in finance. She's an investigator in fraud and finance. And she stumbled upon this story and made a documentary about this woman who was the comptroller, I believe, for a smaller town somewhere in a smaller community. I don't want to say rural, but it was a small community. And she wound up bilking them for tens of millions of dollars. And where greed comes in is that she had the perfect scam. You know, she was skimming and she could have totally gotten away with it because she had everybody's trust. But she had this habit with these horses and these horse shows where she needed these expensive clothing, and the horses and all the trappings that come along with showing horses are very, very expensive. And she just went for it. She just started taking more and more and getting bolder and bolder to the point where it's just disgusting when you see what she took and thought she could get away with.
Great pick here. You just bringing up the episode. I remember talking to Kelly and the film and watching the movie. That whole time, that week was great because it was so interesting of a film, and then being able to talk to the director.
Yeah, it is really an interesting movie.
I threw it into the Jaw box. We'll look that up after the break, what number episode we had Kelly Richmond Pope on. So okay. I'll get that for the Jawheads. Nice, my number 2 pick, you go back to 1947, Matt, and I give you one of the most famous lines in movie history. We don't need no stinking badges.
Oh, yes.
The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, 1947, starring Humphrey Bogart himself, directed by John Huston. This was a film that I finally caught up with. It was one of those classics that everybody says you got to see. And so I had wrote it down and going back some years ago, and I finally watched it. And I love those classics that really live up to the hype. And it's funny because it's been, I don't want to say that it's been ripped off. That's not the word I'm looking for. It's been
paid homage.
Paid homage, right. By The Simpsons.
Weird Al, UHF. We don't need no stinky badgers.
No, but the themes of the movie and there's so many times that this has influenced so much of pop culture, this movie.
Right.
But three men basically journey out for a gold hunt. The one older guy who actually John Huston's dad is actually in the movie, and his character is telling Humphrey Bogart and this other guy, hey, you got to go out to this area. I know where the gold is. We can find it. They go out, they find the gold, right away. It's that paranoia. What are we going to do with all this gold? You're going to double cross me. You're going to double cross me. Nobody knows who to trust. And that's especially true for Humphrey Bogart's character. Later on, you get people who don't even realize, they come across these guys that don't even realize that the riches are right in front of them. And it's that whole paradox of things, right? It's like all of a sudden, everybody cares about this gold in this little pack. Other people come to rob them and don't even realize what's the richest thing on these guys. It's a great movie, great lesson in greed. Too much greed. Money's bad. Stay away from it. Friends are everything.
Like I said, Ryan, I will give you the 1% when we find the treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Into our number ones we go, Matt.
Yeah, speaking of greatest lines of all time, I'm going with the greatest line of cocaine of all time. I don't think there is one better than in the film Brian De Palma made, Scarface. The world is yours, Ryan. It's about a perverted version of the American dream where Tony Montana comes in. It's a rags to riches story. He starts out working in a food truck and he winds up becoming the cocaine mogul of Miami. And, of course, there's murder and mayhem along the way. It's inspired video games. Talk about pop culture. It's inspired music. It's inspired so much graphic design, that classic black and white poster. Everything about this movie just sings, and it's one of the best of all times. And it's totally about how greed can just collapse a person morally and spiritually and leave you, even though you have all the money in the world, just completely bankrupt of anything close to humanity. And at the end of the movie, Tony is just a monster, just dunking his entire head into this giant pile of cocaine and coming out with a gun. And the gonzo violence of it all kind of makes it easy to dismiss as a salacious action movie. But there's so much more going on. There's a reason why this has stood the test of time. Yes, it's violent. Yes, there's a lot of salacious graphics in it, but there's more to the story than just those elements. It's a great movie. It's a masterpiece.
I followed up with a number one that also has a very distinctive character, one that would win an Academy Award for an actor by the name of Daniel Day-Lewis, as he played Daniel Plainview in 2007's There Will Be Blood. This is directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, obviously. And Daniel Plainview is an oil man. His pursuit of money and power. We see the nature of capitalism and greed. There is never enough for him. No stopping, only growing and having more. Nothing else matters, Matt. He has a competition in him. He goes on to say, he gives a great speech, and he also drinks milkshakes that are not his.
Yeah.
That is Daniel Plainview.
that scene is up there with one of the best scenes ever. It's like the shower scene in Psycho. It's one of the greatest scenes of all time. It's when he explains, I drink your milkshake.
And he runs over and it's so funny. It's so funny. And you see how crazed he has gotten at that point. That's when he's at his greediest, right? I mean, now he can't get enough. And that's capitalism in a lot of ways, that the system itself just is always going. There's no end in sight. You do a great job, and the answer is, and the question is, what are you going to do next month or next year? How are you going to grow this?
Yeah. What about next quarter?
Exactly. And that is There Will Be Blood. I think most people have seen it. It is a masterpiece. Do check it out if you have not. Honorable mentions here, Matt K. For you?
I got 3, and I'll just rapid fire them. The Wolf of Wall Street, pretty obvious. Trading Places, I think, is great comedy with the theme of greed at the center. And Glengarry Glen Ross. Those are my 3. What do you got?
Out of that, now only 2. Boiler Room, which was a Ben Affleck, Vin Diesel movie, and also The Grinch.
Yeah, I'll give you The Grinch.
He stole Christmas. I mean, come on.
He was a greedy son of a bitch, that Grinch.
He was unbelievable, that guy.
Took all the presents.
Unbelievable. If we missed your favorite movie about greed, or have a greedy character that we skipped over, and you have Twitter pulled up, shoot us a tweet at Cinemajaw or email us, feedback@cinemajaw.com. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Matt is going to try to finally win Stump the Kabinski. 3 questions to Stump Matt K. We also have Hollywood headlines. Plus, listen to this. Matt K has picked out his favorite Michael Shannon clip. Stick with us, guys.
Excuse us, sir.
No. That's all right. Go ahead. You ladies seem to be chatting enjoyably. Girl talk, no doubt. Don't mind me. Look, don't touch. That lovely dingus right there is an Alabama Howdy Do. Molded grip handle, low current, high voltage electric shock cattle prod. Named Strickland, security.
Fleming security.
Oh, no. A man washes his hands before or after tending to his needs. It tells you a lot about a man. He does it both times. Points to a weakness in character. Ladies, it was very pleasant chatting with you both.
And we are back on Cinemajaw. Matt, before we get to Hollywood headlines and before we get to Stump the Kabinski, as we're calling it, we did throw a few items into the jaw box. One for sure that we had threw in there was Kelly Richmond Pope, who was on Cinemajaw, and she is actually, her title is a forensic accountant.
Right. The financial investigator.
Right.
I wasn't far off. Yeah.
But I wrote it down. I love that title, a forensic
cool.
accountant. It really sounds neat. And I looked it up. She was on Cinemajaw number 358, and we did scandal movies. So we're going back over 100 episodes now.
Wow.
It's
but
crazy.
It doesn't seem like that long ago. I mean, what do you have the date in front of you there?
January 29th, 2018. At least that's when it posted to YouTube, is what I'm looking at here.
Okay. So
somewhere right around then.
Yeah. So sometime in January 2018 or December of 2017.
Yep. Long time ago. But I do recommend Jawheads, if you missed that episode, Kelly Richmond Pope, Scandal Movies, good one to listen to. Another one thrown into the jaw box that I wrote down, Matt was talking about the movie They Live, and he was trying to come up with the year that it came out. You had said early 90s.
I said like 89 or 90, yeah.
Yeah, and you were really close to it. It came out November 4th, 1988.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's right in between the 80s and 90s, so perfect. 88, that makes sense. Great movie.
Indeed. Want to do some Hollywood headlines?
I'm ready. You go first, Ryan.
Sounds good. How about this? HBO wants you to stay the hell home during the coronavirus. And to better encourage you to do so, they're offering a whole bunch of stuff for free. 9 full original series, 10 docuseries, and 20 Warner Brothers theatrical films will be available to stream on HBO for free. No sign up, no nothing. Just go to HBO, any app, and it's free. That's awesome. The movies included, just a couple of highlights: Blinded by the Light, Lego Movie 2, Sucker Punch, Midnight Special, and more. Those are just the movies. You also got The Sopranos, completely free, some docuseries. Do check out HBO Now, whichever one you go to, you'll see a free section while we're sitting at home.
Damn, that's pretty sweet, man. Sopranos alone, but some of those movies you mentioned.
Have you watched The Sopranos?
Not the entire run. I've seen many episodes, and I saw the last episode, but there's a few that I'm missing, so I could use a catch-up.
There you go.
Nice one, Ryan. How about this? Focus Features announced today that they will be reconfiguring their Focus Friday events to Focus Movie Mondays, live stream screenings of films in their library featuring Q&As with the filmmakers. And the best part is the screenings will be totally free, available for anyone to watch directly on Focus Features' Facebook page. And here's a couple highlights for you, Ryan. April 13th at 5 p.m., they're doing Moonrise Kingdoms with questions for Wes Anderson on April 7th, and his answers will be revealed. So there's going to be a bit of a lag between the Q and the A part of it, but still very cool. And then on April 20th, Mallrats with a live watch party featuring Kevin Smith. That is awesome.
Totally. I love that they're doing this. I think that these studios and the streaming apps, be it Netflix or the stream at home, are being very creative. And I love that. That's totally great.
I know. I think they're sort of realizing that they actually have a real station in everything that's going on right now with our stay-at-home orders, and what they're coming up with is pretty cool. So hats off to them.
I noticed a lot of hashtags on Twitter, whatever the movie would be, say The Hunt or the like, it'll say The Hunt watch party this weekend at a certain time. And the idea is that you can watch it in real time and tweet about it. And that way you're somewhat being social and having somewhat of that
interaction,
theatrical experience. Yeah, that interaction of watching it with people, right?
Maybe we should put one of those together, Ryan.
We're thinking about it. Behind the scenes, we're thinking about it.
I think we should. That sounds like fun.
So each week since we've been doing this, usually without a guest, although we did have a guest interview today, but still tricky to play trivia with the setup as we are. We're playing Stump the Kabinski. 3 questions. If Matt K can get one of these right, this is
then I get to try to stump you if I get it right.
Right. This is questions 7, 8, and 9. Matt is 0 for 6 on the first 3.
Oh, rub it in, man.
All right, here we go. Question 1. You ready for it, Matt?
I'm ready.
Dustin Hoffman has been nominated 7 times at the Oscars. He's won twice, both times for lead actor. What 2 films did he win for?
I think I got this one. Rain Man and The Graduate. Damn it. Why do you have to make it 2? I mean, can't I just name one of them? Was I right with Rain Man?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Rain Man and Kramer versus Kramer.
Fuck. Come on, man. That's ridiculous.
His other five nominations were The Graduate, Midnight Cowboy, Lenny, Tootsie, and Wag the Dog.
Tootsie's amazing. But he was nominated for
The Graduate.
The Graduate. I should get credit for that. Come on. That's
so close.
That's
so
harsh.
Close.
Harsh.
Stump the Kabinski.
Harsh.
0 for 7 at this point. 0 for 7 if you're keeping track at home.
Jawheads, you want to know how old I am? I had the soundtrack of The Graduate on 8-track when I was a kid. I listened to it all the time.
Some good Simon and Garfunkel right there.
Hell yeah. 8-track.
Question 2 to you, Matt, this week is, speaking of the Oscars, who was the first female solo host of the Oscars? I'll give you a hint. It happened in 1994.
Really? Holy crap. That's ridiculous. 94. First female solo host in 94. Ah, man. See, I would have guessed somebody like Gilda Radner, but I think she had already passed in 94. I think she passed away in the 80s. So who could have done it in the 90s? Oh, man. This is a tough one, man. I mean, I'm just going to pull out a random 90s movie star and hope that it's correct. Who's like America's darling? Shoot, I don't even have a good guess, Ryan. I'll go with like Amy Poehler. I mean, that's totally off. She wasn't even in the 90s. I don't know.
Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Goldberg.
That's the answer. Yep.
All right. So I left this last question, number 3, easiest one to answer.
All right.
We go to the MCU. What is the highest grossing standalone MCU film? And by that, I mean not one of the 4 Avenger films. So just take the 4 Avenger films out of it, because those are actually the top 4 grossing MCU films. Take those out of it. The standalone films is what I mean. And when you're saying standalone in the MCU, doesn't mean anything because they cross over so damn much.
True.
You know what I mean, though.
I do, and I know what you mean. I think it might be Black Panther, man. I really do. That was a mega surprise hit, and I think it like way outperformed the box office. I'm going to say Black Panther.
Number 9, he hits it.
Finally.
Black Panther went on to make $1.3 billion at the global box office. It is the highest standalone MCU film of all time. Again, the Avenger films, Avengers, I don't know all of them, Avengers Ultron or something.
There's the Avengers Assemble, Avengers Age of Ultron, and there was Endgame, Infinity War, and Endgame.
Endgame, right. Those 4 are the top 4, I noticed when I was doing the research. But Black Panther is number 5 at 1.3 billion. You got it, Matt.
All right. Thank you for
that
giving
means
me
next week you can do 3 questions to stump Rye the Movie Guy.
Well, unless we have a guest who's going to do trivia.
And that might happen.
That might happen. But if that's the case, I'm still going to at least throw you one question to try to stump you.
This has been a blast.
As always, man. It really is.
We don't want to get too greedy here, Matt, so we better end this Cinemajaw.
Well said, Ryan.
We got to thank our sponsors.
Yes, thanks to Jiffy On Demand and to Overcast and the Chicago Podcast Co-op, who help us get great sponsors like them.
If you would like to support Cinemajaw, the easiest way to do so is by leaving us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast.
And please, while you're there, click subscribe. It's one extra click, and it helps us out so much.
Until next week, I'm Rye the Movie Guy.
I'm Matt Kay. And keep on jawing about the movies. Hey, we got it right, Ryan. Finally.